So now I'm going to ask you like this really annoying question. My skeptical grandma, and she says, Irish, come on. How are moving my eyes going to help me with my feelings?
Where we look affects how we feel, and that in itself supports the brain to rewire itself, to release certain traumas. We don't need to know what it is to know that it is.
What kind of drew you to this sort of mind, body, spirit work?
For me, it comes from my own life, comes from my own practices, and how spirituality has shaped everything that has unfolded in my life. Again, it's not religious by any means. It is more of that connecting with something more than me, connecting with something bigger than me, and that's how I would describe it in a sentence. And because that is such an important aspect for me, I work with it because I feel like I'll be able to support clients who have a similar need if I work with it in that way, because I have to work with it the way it sits well with me as well. So as much as I'm open to clients, coming in with any belief system, because spirituality is not a particular thing, it's unique to each person, but I'm open to having those conversations. I'm open to working with that with clients in our work. So if that is something that appeals to people, that's what I provide.
It's quite interesting that, I mean, the journey that you took, right? Like you went from massive experience of pain and heartache and losing loved ones, and then taking that pain and turning it into a book, but also like realizing that this is your life's purpose, your calling to kind of help people, other people struggling with grief and loss. And through that process, first you went to coaching, then you went and did a whole training in therapy. And then as a therapist now, you have kind of felt this calling towards brain spotting, right? So can you kind of help us understand a little bit what is brain spotting?
The brain spotting is a psychotherapeutic model that is used often with trauma work, but it can be used with other things as well, like enhancing certain experiences and building certain qualities in ourselves. But essentially, the idea is that we use eye positions to notice a somatic body-based feeling around a particular topic. And we work with that eye position and those body sensations and feelings very mindfully. We're noticing moment to moment how that is shifting, how our thoughts are shifting, our feelings are shifting, and the body sensations are shifting. We're just observing that. And that in itself supports the brain to rewire itself, to release certain traumas, to help things that feel very prominent but have happened years ago to move into long-term memory and not be so overtaking in a person's system.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it seems like you're helping relieve that suffering for people, and that seems to be the core of what drives you. And I really admire that about you, Irish. I'm just wondering what called you to share that brain spotting thing with people right now at this point in your life with Canadians. Was there anything specific at this point that led you to it? Were you kind of always intrigued by it? How did this come about?
Brain spotting, when I came across it, was when I was studying to become a therapist, and I'd heard of it. It sounded very interesting to me. And somehow one thing led to another, and I eventually went into getting trained in it. And this has been like about a year and a half when I first trained in it. And for me personally, it spoke to me instantly. Like, as different and unique as it was, it also felt very supportive and connecting. And so when I tried it in my trainings, I explored it then with clients after that. And it's over time kind of become that thing for me that this is how I want to practice as a therapist. Like, this is one of the key ways that I want to show up for clients by being able to provide them with this modality because of the change I've seen in myself and the changes I've seen in the clients I've worked with. So it really sold itself to me as I engaged with it. In Canada right now, though there are brain spotting therapists, not to say that there aren't, there could be more, many more. And so I want to, share this information with those who may be interested in becoming therapists for brain spotting, or clients who may be seeking a brain spotting therapy or may be intrigued by or interested in trying it out. So just for kind of increasing awareness is what my purpose is right now.
Yeah, and it seems like you were called to it through your own personal experience, but also your experience of working with your clients and the changes you were noticing in them, and that led you to then want to share it with more people, especially because in Canada it seems there's not a lot of people that are trained in this modality so far, and you would like to get the word out, right? So
Mhm.
now I'm going to ask you like this really annoying question. My skeptical grandma, and she says, Irish, come on. How are moving my eyes going to help me with my feelings? How would
Mhm.
you kind of appease the skeptical grandma?
Well, I would keep it pretty straightforward and simple and kind of use a phrase from brain spotting is that where we look affects how we feel. And so if we notice a certain feeling in
Where we
ourselves,
look affects how we feel.
yes. And so if I was having a particular feeling and based on that feeling, I move my eyes around in my space here, I'll notice in one position it feels more intense and in another position it feels lighter. And that is kind of the core experience of brain spotting, is just noticing how our body is so connected. Our eyes, our body, and our brain, and our feelings and thoughts. And it's all so interconnected, which is why such a holistic therapy fits into my model that I already practice. And so that simple experiment would help a person just notice the connection between everything. And that would explain in itself how this supports releasing of feelings, how it supports processing feelings, because everything is so connected in our system.
So in other words, our vision, the place our eyes are focused on is going to impact other systems in the mind as well. And so that principle, you guys utilize that principle to help with the healing.
Yeah. Because we talk about the ocular nervous system, which is connected to the autonomic nervous system. So there are different ways to connect with the autonomic nervous system, and eyes are one of them, right? We can get through it with some people provide therapies related to like focus on the heart, and others focus on the gut. And all of that connects to the autonomic nervous system, and particularly the vagus nerve.
Got it. So in other words, like using the ocular system, the hope is to access the autonomic nervous system in the hope of allowing healing to take place for whatever experiences that people are struggling with. So that brings me to the next question. So what kind of things does brain spotting is helpful for? Like what kind of things do generally people tend to be struggling with that come to you to get help, or what kind of places they tend to be stuck at that brain spotting seems to help with?
Yeah. I use it quite a bit with trauma. So people who've had traumatic experiences, mostly complex trauma is what I work with. So that which is what brain spotting helps with too, because we're not really picking at a particular scenario or a particular memory. We're kind of working with the feelings that are coming up around an issue, right? So this person is feeling a lack of confidence in a certain area in their life, or they're feeling low self-esteem in a certain area of their life, then there could be a whole trauma history there that is contributing to that. So we are able to kind of tap into that through the brain spotting process. We believe in the body's natural healing system. We kind of are just holding space for that natural healing to occur very mindfully in brain spotting. And so I work with clients mostly with trauma, also with grief, but in some cases we'll also work with positive emotions that we want to grow, and we want to, maybe with performance anxiety, like trying to get to a certain goal in our abilities and in our qualities. So it can be used in that context as well. I use it there too, a little bit less than trauma. I definitely have more trauma work that I do with it.
Correct. So trauma seems to be the primary, like the thing that you focused on.
For me, yeah, for my practice, that's what's showing up right now, but then different things show up as time processes. So maybe down the road, I'll be working more with the expansion model, which is to increase or enhance the feeling of something positive.
Okay. So then that would be not just working with tough stuff, but also enhancing positive stuff. And I guess the use case of that would be creativity, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
What could that look like? Like if I came to you and be like a writer or artist, and please help me, Irish, I don't feel inspired anymore so much. What would that look like?
I've used that on a personal level, so I can really speak to it from that experience as well. I use brain spotting for writing poetry in particular. It can also be, I've also used it for art a few times, but essentially it kind of lifts that judging person inside of us, that judging part that can sometimes block us from access to those creative ideas. And once we can kind of hold through the eye position, we're holding space for this creativity to flow through, and we're not judging it, we're not like restricting it by any means, then we can just flow with it. And from that, like we're able to extract whatever kind of artistic venture we're on. Like if we're trying to write poetry or make art or whatever it is, the process will open something up, and then you can have like a creative outcome from that. And I'm part of a little group called Brainspotting from the poets. That's what we do there as a group. We do our brain spotting. We'll come together as a group. We'll share our poems. But apart from that, I'm also part of a journal called Bone to Brain, which essentially accepts submissions from all kinds of people who've done brain spotting for creativity. So there's so much there in the journal to check out, like how these two things work together. And it's fascinating. I've just been so lucky to be a part of that.
Nice. Yeah, I really admire that you are actually not only practicing it as a therapist, but also practicing what you preach by actually implementing these protocols in your own life. So that's really neat. So a little bit of a maybe, not technical question, but just wondering, what's the overlap with EMDR? Like, how is it similar? How is it different? Because over there, they also talk about healing using your eyes and things like that, right?
Yeah, there is an overlap with EMDR for brain spotting. Essentially, when Dr. David Grant, who discovered, I would say, brain spotting because it did exist on a natural level, and he found it in that existence. EMDR was what he practiced prior to brain spotting. This is in 2003. That's how old brain spotting is, and he had developed a method of EMDR called natural flow EMDR, which is a little bit slower with the eye position, which is what has fast eye position movements. And when he developed that model, through that, he came across a client whom he just stopped at a point with, and so much came out of that. So that would be an interesting story for you to like read about or look into, that he shared of the first time he explored and discovered brain spotting. So that's how it stems from EMDR. It has similarities that we are working with eye positions. It's also used for trauma quite a bit, EMDR. So it has that similarity, but there are also some key differences where EMDR is a little bit more structured and has a protocol that it follows through a number of sessions. Brain spotting is more integrated in that sense that you can it's not as structured. It can be brought into any session in a very flexible way. And it doesn't work with particular memories. It can work with an issue a person is having. So that's what we call it, that this is what I'm struggling with and I want to work on this. We don't need to know where the issue came from, what the memory is, or any of that, which in EMDR, I believe there is a little bit of like exploring the memory and feelings associated with the memory. Even though in brain spotting, it's not to say memory can't pop up, but it's not like kind of something we have to work on things. It
Mm.
can pop up in the process though.
So in other words, one doesn't need to be trained or in EMDR in order to be trained in brain spotting, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're two separate things. They have
Right.
a connection, but they are definitely two separate things. The trainings are separate. The trainings are different. I'm not trained in EMDR. So
Mhm.
whatever I know is what I've heard about EMDR. And that's why, like, and when I was looking into EMDR, I was at a point trying to make a decision between that and brain spotting. And when I was looking into it, what really spoke to me was the fact that brain spotting is not structured. And that's how I work. Like, I work with an integrated model anyways. So it fits better with how I work, which is why I chose brain spotting.
Got it. So it was your personal preference and what works for you played a part in making that eventual decision. Okay. And so then, like, what would that like look like for a person who wants to book a session with you? What can they expect in the first session or first few sessions for brain spotting?
So I guess it depends on if they're coming to me with the idea that they want to do brain spotting. In that case, I'll focus on that. But because that's not all I practice, if they weren't coming in for brain spotting, I would introduce it to them as a brief idea initially. And then as we like after building rapport for a few sessions is when I'll probably kind of bring it in more detail with them. But if somebody's coming to me for brain spotting in particular, then I would explain to them what brain spotting is. Even if they know about it a little bit, we would go over everything. We would go over like any therapy, the benefits and the potential risks of what that looks like, what the process looks like, and then we'll explore it through like a gentle trial to see if it's a good fit for them after they actually experience it themselves. And
Mhm.
then we'll kind of continue from there. Then it's a very creative and unique process from client to client because the way I practice will depend again on what the client is there for, what they're seeking from therapy, and how they're changing from session to session as well. So it's evolving.
Yeah, actually, I find that very interesting because, first of all, if I was a client booking a session after hearing that, I would feel a lot like calmer. I'd be like, okay, she'll explain everything to me, she'll show me the roadmap, and then we can go from there. But also, she will tailor it to my specific case, right? Instead of applying a generalized brushstroke. It sounds like you personalize it to the person.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Especially because I work integratively. So I may not even only use brain spotting in a session. I may bring in a little bit of when we're doing some of the what we call like the pre-brief and the debrief is called front loading and back loading in brain spotting. In those elements, I can bring in, for example, logotherapy, which is also something I practice, or bring in something from the Jungian model, also something I practice, maybe a little bit of an introduction to parts work. And we can then include that in the brain spotting process itself, the parts work. So it depends how I integrate depending on what we're dealing with the client.
So it that sounds like a very integrated approach that you take to it. So, it seems like it would be also very personalized and tailored. This is more of a specific brain spotting question, and I don't know how to even ask it, but I guess like what is a brain spot really? Just in simple words.
Brain spot in simple words, I would say, is the space in our mind, in our brain, that holds particular information based on that we can access based on a particular eye position. So when we're talking, we're like kind of, looking here, looking there, which may seem like it's nothing, but as a brain spotter, I would be observing that. I'd be observing where the client is looking when they're talking about certain things, because there is something there that their brain is doing in that particular area when they're looking in a certain position. And that's kind of like the underlying belief here, is that the other phrase in brain spotting is that we don't need to know what it is to know that it is. I don't need to know
what it is to know that it is. Okay.
yeah, we don't need we
What
don't
a
need
thing
to
to know that it exists.
exactly. I don't need to know what's happening to their brain necessarily when they're processing this, like how their brain is processing, to know that it is processing.
Right.
That there is, like, when they're naturally looking into a certain place, which we would call a gaze spot, there's something that their natural healing system is doing, and all we do is bring mindful attention to it. That's essentially what we're doing as a brain spotter. Through different tools, of course, we're using different methods and tools of like altering the eye positions to enhance whatever it is that they're trying to get access to. And so it's on many levels a very natural process. It's just the element added is the mindfulness and the observation of it, which we don't generally do when we're like just gazing into some space. We don't do that, but that can really release whatever is being held by the system, by the body.
Right. And when you're doing these, Irish, I'm just curious, like, I'm sure there's a large range of things that people notice during these experiences, these therapy sessions. Can you give us some safe examples of like what kind of things you've noticed people noticing in their own experience? Like what kind of things do people feel and notice during a brain spotting session?
Yeah, it varies significantly. So there's no specific thing I can say that people feel. Despite that, there are some like themes that we can notice. Body sensations really surprise people when they're like, oh, I didn't think I would feel this in this place, but I do. The other thing is sometimes, they're just like so focused on the process. And once we move into a particular eye position, they find an emotional reaction coming up and they're surprised. They're like, why am I feeling just because I'm looking in this particular position? Otherwise, like if I look here, I'm feeling nothing. So that contrast, it really surprises them, and it kind of helps them trust the process too, because that's such a critical part of
Right.
moving any type of therapy, is to have a level of safety and trust that a person feels. That has to be embodied from them. Like I can't impose or push or pressure anybody into feeling that way. They need to experience that for themselves. And so I think these type of things, when they notice, help them build that trust.
Yeah. So it actually is interesting because just that slight shift creates different feelings, and that people noticing that within session then augments their trust towards the process, which in turn probably feeds into the therapy working even better for them.
It supports them in various ways. And again, every client is different, so their experience may vary. For some people, it's a little bit more noticeable. For others, it's more subtle, the difference that they notice.
Yeah, okay. That's cool. Earlier, we were talking about the mind, body, spirit thing. And so you mentioned like spiritual stuff is very important too, right? So what kind of meanings or insights you've noticed clients reporting after their therapy sessions or after the therapy's done or during the therapy?
Yeah, that there is like the internal healing system, which is what I keep calling it, but that I'm referring to like their intuition, in like IFS, we would call it essentially the self with the capital S, is that core being, right? That is not affected by the parts, that has those qualities. So that is the internal healing system that we're accessing, essentially that part, that being, that core being that can alter how experiences have impacted a person's existence, either that be mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually. So we're working with all of those elements. And so when they're sharing insights in these sessions of, some connections they're making between a childhood experience to a present experience, and you can see the surprise, right? You can notice that they're even telling you sometimes that I'm surprised this even has a connection, but that's what I'm noticing right now. And that's what we kind of encourage. We encourage to just notice whatever comes up. We don't have to figure it out. We don't have to make sense of it. We just notice it. And in that noticing, the insights that emerge about it can vary again from their personal experiences, their personal life, to like existential understandings and spiritual understandings so it depends, but there's a lot of interesting stuff that can come up in sessions as clients are processing whatever they're there for.
And what I'm thinking right now is like this therapy seems like there's a lot of value placed on, your own internal sensations and feelings and being able to access and to be aware of them and to notice them. Like if you are encountering a client who's very cerebral, up in the head, cognitive type, what do you mean by sensations? I don't feel anything. Like, have you ever encountered a situation like that? So like, I would be curious to know how you handle that.
Yes, I definitely come across that. And in that case, we'll want to give the client a sense of what it's like to notice your body, because in most cases, they don't have that experience. And so they might not even know what they're looking for, or they might be like, well, I always feel this feeling in my chest, like, or it's always coming up in their chest. But we kind of try to like express it in that way where it's noticing, right? We're just observing. We're not judging it. We're not questioning it, that why is it not showing up here but always showing up here, or why I don't feel it. So when they can't feel anything, we'll kind of just go with something where they feel like grounded, like if their feet are touching the ground, that's a sensation. They can feel that. And so we kind of teach them to notice their body and to notice how their body is expressing itself when it's going through different feelings, because it's also having a response. We just may not notice it. So that's where I would start with that. And I would also kind of blend in talk therapy with brain spotting. I wouldn't just purely go into hour-long brain spotting sessions, because that can be a lot for a person who's not that type of processor.
Yeah, and it sounds like you do like a gentle, slowly build their awareness of their body and help them sort of notice things over time,
Mhm.
and then just kind of cater to how much they can take and always kind of step back and just go back to like talking and then retry brain spotting when they're ready again. So it seems like like you try your best not to intimidate your client, but at the same time help them reach their goals and to reach the breakthroughs they're looking for through this modality.
Yes, the client autonomy is of the utmost priority to me. So they, when they are agreeing to doing something, they need to know what they're agreeing to properly. And when they're not agreeing to it, then we don't have to do that. We can have other things we can work with. And of course, if there's nothing that I can do that works, then we will refer them out to somebody else who may be able to support them. So their choice is so crucial in the whole therapy process in general.
Mhm. And I think that's a really good thing you're identifying, because often, like when people are new to therapy and have never been to therapy, they can be pretty intimidating to go to a therapist and talk about stuff. And they really are like, like, am I going to be told what to do? And, how am I,
Mm.
there's lots of questions being on people's minds. So it seems like you were just saying that, like, you really, prioritize that and their autonomy and their ability to choose, and you give them all the right information. And it sounds like you're a really good therapist, and it sounds really cool. So what is like a misconception about brain spotting that you would love to correct, that you think that is out there that people are, misperceive or misconstrue about brain spotting?
Again, I feel like brain spotting is still, whenever I encounter people, don't, it's more, I've come across more people who don't know about it than who do know about it. So for those that do know about it, I think one of the online, if you look it up, the first thing you're going to probably find is that it's for trauma, and that's what it works for. And it does work for trauma, but that's not all it's for. I've seen the power of brain spotting in creativity and in helping performance, and to help kind of pursue those qualities that we as humans want to grow in ourselves. How much brain spotting can help with enhancing that, and not just resolving what's not working or what's been kind of holding us back, that type of thing. So I think it has a lot of potential in both areas. It can kind of do a lot more than it's given credit for.
All right. So I guess the misconception that you find is that people think that it's narrowly focused only for people with trauma. But what you seem to be saying is that no, actually, it's a lot broader than that. And you have experienced that in your own life through your own
Mhm.
experiences. So it seems like you've been through brain spotting sessions yourself and you found them extremely helpful.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Especially for creativity, because that's where I've used it the most. And yeah, my writing has definitely grown from that process. And I've even been able to kind of tap into newer ways of writing, because when I'm writing poetry, at least I can speak for myself, it has a particular style. So I feel like I've been able to explore slight changes to my style when I use brain spotting.
Okay, so that's interesting. So it helped you kind of break your own pattern and to recreate a new pattern, slightly modified version of your old pattern.
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
okay. Well, that's really cool, because often that could be a hurdle for creative people too. Like they start creating things that are, like that one band that has one song that's famous and all their other songs sound like the same song.
Right,
Right.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is there anything, like, let's say somebody's just listening right now, is there anything, if they're curious about brain spotting, that they can try it like as a simple awareness practice? that you recommend as homework or something like that?
Yeah. Well, the idea of self-spotting, which is a very brief practice, again, not to be done with any kind of trauma work, because it's better to work with a therapist in that case. But for something simple, like if you're having simple nerves come up or something like that, you can do self-spotting, which is essentially like finding an eye position that eases that feeling. So if I'm feeling anxious and I want to ease the feeling of anxiety, then I can find a spot in my vision that just reduces that a little bit. So there are like videos online that can walk people through how to do that. But that's what it's called, self-spotting, where we kind of just take a moment. Again, it can be like a mindfulness practice where, we have maybe a big presentation coming up and we just want to take a moment to put a focus on an eye position that makes us feel calm rather than activated or nervous.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Yeah, it reminds me of a professor during one of my MBA classes. Like he would always be looking at a corner of the room and he would be talking. And we asked him one time, like, like you almost never look at any of us. Or I don't know how. And he's like, well, for some reason, if I'm looking over there, it's a lot easier for me to give this lecture. So it sounds like maybe that was his like how like I don't know what that would be called in brain spotting, but like some kind of brain spot that was helpful.
We would like there are all kinds of names in brain spotting. Like if we're processing a dream, we call it dream spotting. Or there's the thing I've heard of that I haven't come across in my practice yet, but what they call a God spot, where we kind of connect with that spiritual, entity that we believe in. I think what you're describing, if I was to name it, I would call it like the knowledge spot, to access knowledge around whatever the professor is teaching.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't think I have that one, but I'm missing that knowledge. So what about like people interested in exploring this with a therapist? What should they ask before sort of booking and what kind of things to be aware of and looking for a trained brain spotting therapist?
I think for any therapy, client should ask all the questions that they can during like a discovery call or a consultation call to get a proper understanding of how the therapist practices, because different people are going to practice differently. And then finding that right fit. When it comes to brain spotting, it's very similar. Kind of finding that right fit of a therapist that you feel connected to is pretty important, but also like finding a brain spotting therapist that can, I guess, has been trained to the point that what you're looking for. So there are different levels of training, and different levels are going to explore brain spotting to different extent. So they're called phases, phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's a few other trainings, well, many other trainings that also qualify. So just seeing like to what extent the therapist is trained, depending on to what extent you want to use brain spotting as well. Not to say that phase 1 or phase 2 therapists can't do it. They definitely can, and they can do quite a bit with it. But it's again, like if you're looking for that more, then you can look at further trained therapists. But I think the rapport portion is the most important, because that's what brain spotting is going to work off of, is the rapport we have with the person we're working with.
So rapport is important, figuring out what kind of training they had, how long they had it, those things. Is there kind of a person for which brain that might not be a good candidate for brain spotting type treatment?
Yeah, I think one of the first things I would say is their preference. If that is just not something that appeals to them and this doesn't connect with them at a particular point in time, I feel like some things in life connect with us at certain times, and something might not work today, but maybe 2 years from now, it might work really well. So at a particular time, it may not be their preference. It may not be something they connect to. Secondly, if they really struggle with the somatic awareness, then again, if they're open to the idea of getting to brain spotting, then it can be worked with, like other things can be done to get there. But if that is just not something they want to do, then I think that in itself speaks a lot to that this might not work as well, because they're just not feeling that level of connection with it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so then let's say somebody watches this or, just interested in your work and your services and workshops that you give and stuff like that. So how could they find Irish and get in touch? And can you tell a little bit more about yourself and your services?
Absolutely. So I work for my own private practice called Irish Wellness. And through my practice, I provide integrative and holistic therapy. So brain spotting is one thing that I do, but I bring in different models depending on the client. So what I call it is this creative model of therapy, where we tailor it and make it each person's, right? So it's unique to the person and what we're working with. So that's how I practice. And you can find me, or if you want to connect with me, through my website, which is www.irishoakwellness.com. And there's more information on the website as well about what I do as a therapist. And I have a 30-minute free consultation that I book so that we can have an understanding of like, is this a good fit for both of us? If this is something they would want to move forward with, and really, again, emphasizing that autonomy piece, that it is their choice, and that I want to make sure if they do move forward, they feel confident in this to move forward. And if they don't, then I can provide other resources or more information, or refer them out to a different therapist that may be a better fit for them.
Wow. So it sounds like regardless whether they book or not, they're gonna get the benefit of connecting with you because you will either help them out and or in the way of providing therapy, or you would connect them with a resource that's more relevant for them. So either way, it's a win-win to reach out to you.
Yeah, I would say so. Yes. And yeah, that 30-minute consultation isn't like you have to then book a session after. That consultation is available to anybody that might be interested in working together.
So it seems like you work virtually, so you can basically provide services to anybody, anywhere then.
In Ontario. So I work specifically in Ontario virtually. There are some other provinces I can work with, but then that is very specific. Depends on the regulation in the provinces. So that I'd have to look into if somebody reaches out. But within Ontario, I can work with anybody virtually.
Got it, guys. So you have to be lucky enough to be in Ontario to work with Irish. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate taking the time to talk to me today and telling us about your approach and brain spotting. And I know we were just kind of covering the surface there. There was a lot more probably, but hopefully we can learn more about that from you in the future. But really appreciate you coming over and talking to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everything, for asking all these very insightful questions, and for providing your feedback and your observation of what I'm sharing, which is very helpful for me as well, to see, what sits well and what maybe requires further explanation to properly comprehend what I'm saying.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Okay. Bye.